Welcome everyone. Today we have another new episode, and this is our 289 episodes. Uh, Thank you all of our speakers for supporting World Talent Economy Forum last 1 years. We are growing very fast, and I'm really happy to have very valuable speaker like Mr. David Schumacher, Dr. Eric, Professor Donald, Professor Edward, Brenda, Mr. Imran, and always our mentor, Mr. Rob. So thank you for joining today's. Hopefully today's session will be very interesting because we will discuss on technology and entrepreneurship. I want to start from Mr. Rob. How you want to analyze today's topic?
And what is today's topic?
Technology and entrepreneurship.
Oh, okay, sure. Technology entrepreneurship. All right. So a lot of the current advancement in terms of small companies being able to grow to large ones or creating new companies comes with this move to automation and the cloud. So things that we couldn't do if we weren't larger companies, we now can do by tying into cloud resources and getting access to technology that in prior decades were only available to very large companies. And so the end result is a very small company coming up can do a lot more now than they could previously because of this access to these shared cloud resources. And so as you're advancing into your entrepreneurial spirit, part of the skill set you're going to want to develop is an ability to use the technology in the cloud as opposed to buying your own hardware and doing it that way because it's cheaper, less risk, and and as I said, gives you access to capabilities that you otherwise wouldn't have.
Thank you. Mr. David Schumacher, how do you want to analyze today's topic, technology and entrepreneurships?
Yeah, well, good day, everyone. And I'll start off in great agreement with my colleague there, Mr. Rob. I see technology three ways. Technology and entrepreneurship, this relationship. Technology is the enabler, as I think Rob was talking about. Because of the abilities that we have in the cloud, the abilities that we have with new technology, if you want to start an entrepreneurial enterprise, say in retail, for example, storefronts are now easy to build. There are many choices out there that are available to you. Startups, online legal services, and so forth, making that type of information readily available to you and at incremental costs. The ability to reach out globally, like we're doing today in this discussion, is something that technology enables that has not been there in the past. The ability to use online analytical tools, once again, back in the cloud, sifting through the information, doing your market research, looking for customers, looking for a particular niche. Technology enables in that way as well. We've had a whole discussion on fintech, so things like capital to get a business started is available, and I can provide some examples. Be able to manage a team in dispersed locations to be able to bring this together. You don't have to have everybody under the same physical roof to be able to start a new enterprise, and there is software that is available and well flushed out to be able to do this, to be able to bring teams in from all over. And that goes right into remote work so that those people can work remotely, they can whiteboard, they can collaborate, they can even have side-by-side desk discussions with applications like Slack and so forth, and create this office environment that many of us grew up in the physical office environment, but can do it on a global scale. And probably one of the greatest things that helps with this, that goes back to what Rob was saying about small corporations being able to take on larger corporations, is the fact that all of this has come with fewer and fewer costs, to the point where it can take less startup capital to get a business going. So technology is an enabler, but technology also can be the product, or technology in combination with something can be a product. So technologies that I like to talk about are like AI, and we talk about that sometimes in the abstract. But I just read an an article about how finally the hype of, say, like AI working with pharma to develop and flush out new drugs is actually starting to create drugs in the pipeline. And it's doing so at a rate that humans could not sustain before. Augmented reality is another technology that's coming on. We've talked on this show before about Microsoft's HoloLens and how that has moved from a consumer device into a device for construction, for medicine, for industry, to be able to replace things like service manuals and to help with inspection and things of that nature. And then we've also talked about blockchain, another exciting technology. Now, most people tend to think of blockchain, you tend to jump to the idea of like cryptocurrencies and so forth. But blockchain, that distributed ledger on the back end, I think may be one of the biggest technologies that we're going to see going forward, and is good to build businesses around. One that has an interest to me is a decentralized social network. We see the social networks in the news a lot these days. We see them, well, right now, a lot of the news, as most news is it comes from the negative side. And this whole idea of decentralization, of being able to validate who's speaking and what those sources are by creating a clear audit trail, if you will, in the blockchain is another exciting possibility. So technology is the enabler and technology is in the product, but none of that's any good without the entrepreneur. The entrepreneur is the one that actually creates the transformation, takes the technology, builds a market around it, creates value, improves lives, and things are never the same again. So those are the three things that I want to point out this morning. Technology is the enabler, technology is the product, and it's the entrepreneur that brings the transformation.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Eric, how do you want to analyze to this topic? Yeah.
Yeah. So when you talk about technology, there's two aspects, and I think others have already discussed this. One is the application of technology to help the entrepreneur succeed, and the other is the creation of new technology as the entrepreneurial product or service. In both ways, it's helpful, right? Today, as what David had mentioned, today, a company can start with so low of an overhead. So very little capital is needed to start out because technology is available for people to make things at a so much lower cost. Okay. And it's not just for business type of thing. I mean, if you want to be the next, rock star, as it like a musician, you can rent a soundproof room, okay, where you can play without having the distraction of, fire trucks and police cars and all that. You can rent one for very cheap. You can make, production quality audio for very low costs, and send it out to the whole world. Skip the agents and the producers and all those people. Just upload it directly to iTunes. I don't know how many people buy things from iTunes anymore, but you can, right? You can upload it directly to iTunes, and then you go to Facebook or Spotify or whatever sites to market your song, and suddenly people will buy it for 99 cents or whatever it is that you want to charge. And there you go. You start making money, and the cost is minimal. Okay. And you can do something similar for software, for hardware, for whatever it is. And so technology has enabled entrepreneurs to lower their upfront costs, and that's tremendous. The second part that I was talking about was producing technology. Here, I think people get a little too simplistic, and they think that, okay, all I have to do is build a better mousetrap, okay, build a better technology. And that is ultimately not true. People think, okay, I just have to build a cooler software and all that. And that's not what works. What really works is the business model innovation, is to create a compelling reason why or how you can charge a tenth of what competing products are. You don't have to make the best whiz bang, super cool, everything, type of software or whatever it is. You just have to have something works, but you got to make it where the competition is charging, let's say the competition is charging $1 per unit for it, but you're charging 10 cents a unit. Okay. A 1/10 is usually the breaking point where you completely destroy the competition. Okay. If they're doing $1 and you do it for 90 cents, that's not compelling. But if it's 10 cents, that's compelling. And that's where people are going to come in. And that's a business model innovation and not technology. Of course, the innovation requires you to kind of be creative in how you figure out how to price it and how you're going to fund it and all these other stuff. And that's the creativity of the entrepreneur. Above and beyond doing the creativity of creating that technology. So that's what I want to say at the moment.
Oops. Brenda. Sorry.
Hi, everybody, and thanks, Sharif, again for the opportunity. I think technology and entrepreneurship, for me, at this point in time, I think it's something that, cannot be separated. Entrepreneurs need technology to be able to navigate in this fast-paced world. You also looking at what has happened now in COVID, for those that didn't really buy into the fact that technology is the enabler, as mentioned before, that technology is one of those things that will business edge. We have now seen with COVID how important technology is and how useful it can be if it's deployed properly, if it's used properly. So for me, when you talk about technology and entrepreneurship, in my head, it is the two things that cannot be separated if you really wanna compete in a shared economy globally, if you wanna be competitive in this day and age. So it's something that you really need to understand, in the sense that, one, you need to know how you can use it to be able to be ahead of your competitors. Two, to know how to use it ethically. And also, you need to know what technology you need for what purpose. Not just use technology because everybody's using technology. It has to be relevant to your needs. It has to be relevant to what your client needs, and also to your delivery model. It should not now come in as something that stops you from delivering that service that you had initially intended to deliver, or change your business. To start with understanding what it is that you want to deliver to your client, and based on that, you can say, what technology do I need and what technology can work for me, and that will be beneficial for all the people that hold a share in my company, be it the clients, the shareholders, or the communities that I operate in.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Professor Edward.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I have to go fairly soon, so I will try to be quick here. I want to first recommend a book that happens to be edited by myself, and Brenda knows this book, I believe, because I have a whole chapter in here on entrepreneurship and technology. So your listeners can get this book. It's online, Amazon, which is a very innovative entrepreneurial company, offers this book. But I want to frame the issue in this way. we've spoken in these wonderful broadcasts of all sorts of technologies. We've talked about fintech. We've talked about 3D printing, manufacturing, the internet, digitizing, and you can go on and on with all of these discussions of particular technologies. The entrepreneur is the creator who takes and brings together the technologies to create some kind of value that is of use to customers, that is of use to society, and the like. What an entrepreneur does, first of all, is meet unmet needs. To say, look, there's something that there's something that is not being done, and boy, can we create value if we can figure a way to do it. Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, for example, came up with the idea of PayPal. That is when the internet started, and when Amazon and actually it was eBay initially started. There was a problem of how can I buy something from somebody who I don't know, and make sure the money gets to them, and make sure the product gets to me. And they came up with the notion of PayPal, which was an intermediary, a trusted intermediary that, of course, later dominated that sector and made Elon Musk and Peter Thiel millions and millions of dollars. And now he's building spaceships and being an entrepreneur in that area. I suggest Mr. Thiel's book. I'll read this book. What entrepreneurs do is they combine resources, combine and recombine resources. In other words, they say, well, let me see, where can I take this resource? Where can I take that? It's going to be materials. It's going to be human abilities and human skills. It's going to be perhaps a physical location. It's going to be all the technologies that we've discussed. So what an entrepreneur and what the entrepreneurial genius is taking those resources and putting them together in a certain way to create something that's valuable, something that clients or customers will pay for. The entrepreneur often fails. Henry Ford was an entrepreneur who failed twice before he created Ford Motor Company, and you can go over the record of entrepreneurs who fail and go ahead and do something and continue and learn from their mistakes and move ahead. And part of the reason is that an entrepreneur is like a scientist, an experimenter. The entrepreneur is experimenting, trying, well, maybe this, maybe that. How will this work? And they often fail, but they gain knowledge. Here's another important point. Entrepreneurs usually have and should seek the best local knowledge they can, the knowledge of their markets. That's something that you can't do with huge organizations quite often. That's why a lot of times you have a huge organization develop or a huge business develop, and then it fails because it loses track of its customers. It loses track of its market. Entrepreneurs have vision. They are always thinking in the long term as well as the short term, as we've had some discussions. I want to make a couple more points here because I do have to leave in a few minutes. You can think of an entrepreneur operating in many different sectors. Entrepreneurs can operate, obviously, producing products. Sometimes the best entrepreneurs produce products that you don't even know what you need. The clear example is the personal computer. And Steve Jobs figuring out that, people don't even know they need this thing, but I'm going to show them how they need it. And then another entrepreneur comes along and develops an app for a personal computer, for example, spreadsheets, and suddenly the personal computer is valuable. These are all entrepreneurial efforts and very interesting entrepreneurial efforts. Processes. You can be an entrepreneur of processes. Henry Ford was an example who didn't just say, well, let's have a shop and we're going to make a car. Let's have an assembly line. Let's have standardized parts. Let's move along the assembly line and that way we can cut costs so radically that we can pay our workers more than most workers get, and more Americans can afford to buy this car. So we're expanding our market, an entrepreneurial process. Eric mentioned an entrepreneur with business models. And again, this is somewhere an entrepreneur can figure out how to do something better, how to have a better business model. You can have entrepreneurs of services. One of my favorite examples is I know a gentleman who, when he was a college student, I think this was at Yale in the early 1970s, had a proposal for a company or a business that could actually deliver packages in an express way. in competition with the government monopoly, the U.S. Postal Service. And his professor said, this is not a very good idea. It's not going to work. I'm going to give you a bad grade on your paper. This young student went on to found Federal Express, which is, of course, one of the most profitable. His name is Fred Smith, by the way. I know Fred Smith. Founded one of the most profitable companies in the country and in the world. He was an entrepreneur. He didn't listen to the experts. He used his own intuition. He used his own insight. You can have an entrepreneur in other services, and this is what's really exciting, especially in emerging economies. You can have an entrepreneur, for example. I want to see entrepreneurs in education. Education is the most important issue for any country. And having an entrepreneur, we have a system in this country, unfortunately, that's 19th century mass production. Students at 10 o'clock go and they study math, and 11 o'clock they study history, and at 12 o'clock they go down the assembly line. Well, that worked maybe a century ago. It doesn't work really today. And so you can have an entrepreneur and entrepreneurs who are coming along and saying, we have a better way of treating students as individuals, because that's what they are. They're individuals. You learn in different ways. My twins each learn in a different way. So entrepreneurship is the creation of value. It's taking all of these wonderful technologies that we have today and pulling them together and experimenting and see where it works out so that you can create value for everybody. You bring down costs. You get rich that way, and everyone else gets rich. And I'm going to end on one final note. Governments make very poor entrepreneurs because a lot of times their decisions are based on politics, on, well, I'm going to help this interest because they'll vote for me, or they'll give me campaign funds or whatever. And so then what happens is they become a vested interest, so that even if they fail, failure doesn't mean, well, you have to get into another business and try something else. Failure means, well, you can go to Congress and get even more money, because you say, well, you need more money for this thing. It's only the entrepreneur in the private sector that can take a technology, even if it's developed in a government lab, and commercialize it. That is to say, make it accessible, make a good or service out of it that's accessible to more and more people. So that is my take on entrepreneurship. All of the discussions we have come down to pointing to the entrepreneur and saying, you are the folks, the men and women who can pull all of these things together, create value, experiment, and bring us into our prosperous exponential future. And I'm sorry for going on. I have to get off, but thank you very much. And
Thank you.
Thank you to all my friends here.
Thank you, Professor Edward. Professor Donald, so how do you want to analyze technology and entrepreneurship?
Well, everybody said some very important things, and I really appreciate what they have to say. I would like to just go to the definition of technology. If you look up in the dictionary what technology is, it's taking scientific advances and turning them into businesses. So in a sense, there can't be technology without entrepreneurs. They're built in together, as Brenda said. She mentioned that they go together. I mean, somebody's got to turn the technology into something useful. It's possible for that to happen within governments and within other kinds of organizations. I want to just mention that in order to have a business, you have to have capital. And that's one of the reasons many businesses fail. Imagine that you've got a business where you're selling something. You make something that people buy. Well, in order to make it, you have to buy the raw materials to make it. I have a friend whose first business failed simply because of the fact that so many people ordered from him. He didn't have enough money to make the stuff. He didn't have the capital to make it. He couldn't buy the parts that were necessary to make the stuff that he was doing. From what I said, the possibilities of creating technology are endless, because I look at an entrepreneur as somebody who manages the resources and gets the resources to be able to build something, to be able to make a business. And when you think of what a business has to do to get started, it needs three main things. It needs financial capital, human capital, and social capital. So financial capital is money. And the way people get money is through a couple of ways. You can borrow money. When you're creating your business, you have to ask the question, how much money do I need to make the stuff that I'm producing? And it could be that you need more human capital, which is basically the people that you hire that have the knowledge to make your business go. And I'll give when we talk about using the cloud and some of the resources that are on the cloud, there's a big caveat with that. I would suggest you go into Amazon and try and create a network that does Hadoop so that you can really learn Hadoop really well. What you need is multiple systems with security that are able to talk to each other, and that it's so effing complicated that one of the business that people are doing well at is just being able to do things on Amazon. And whatever whatever kind of an entrepreneur you are, you need to have the technology to enable what you're doing. But there's one person can't do everything. So there's so many ways that people can turn scientific knowledge into companies right now that it's mind-boggling. And people mentioned fintech. There's also ed tech. There's also CRISPR and the whole thing of biology. High school students can genetically modify organisms now. It's so simple to do. The COVID vaccines that work really well, the ones that have 95% efficacy, were done by identifying and modifying RNA to create messenger RNA that created a protein that caused the immune system to recognize the COVID virus and attack a certain part of the COVID virus that they were hoping would have the fewest mutations and short circuit it, so it couldn't work. It blocks it. And the first company, actually it was a university, the first people that came up with a possible COVID vaccine, and of course you have to test these things forever to make sure that they don't harm people and that they actually work. And that's a very complicated statistical analysis that you have to do. It's not simple at all. I might mention that later, but get into that later. But the first vaccine was created in, catch this, 3 hours. That's how advanced and sophisticated this technology has become. And the whole thing of mRNA, to be able to start using it and generating ways to create vaccines and other things that we need to kind of modify our bodies so that they can work more effectively, is just burgeoning. It's a fabulous new business. But the ultimate thing that I'm going to say is that we're buried and we're embedded in technology. There's no way that you can have more than a superficial knowledge of most of it. I have a superficial knowledge of mRNA. I've used Amazon cloud stuff, and I have a superficial knowledge of that. I know how complicated it is. So whatever it is that you're passionate about and what you're interested in, the most successful program I ever wrote was because I was working at Hewlett-Packard, and we had this problem that was costing money. It was a very difficult problem. It was making the software that we were making less reliable. And I figured out a very simple solution to it, which then took off. I mean, everybody started using it because everybody had the same problem. So it's just like kind of that's what the human capital aspect of it is. It's the people that you need to be able to actually make what it is that you're doing. So the entrepreneurs themselves have to be able to organize acquire the financial capital, acquire the human capital. If you get the wrong person when you're starting out, it's not going to help you. And finally, social capital is the connections that you need to be able to find the people that you need to be able to do what it is that you need to do.
Thank you. Mr. Imran, can you hear me? Dr. Imran. Yes. Can you? Yes. We have our new friend, Mr. Stuart. Thank you for joining. So I'm coming to you before that. Mr. Imran, can you hear me?
Yeah, Sharif. Yeah, I can hear you, Sharif.
Yes, please continue your speech on technology and entrepreneurship.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. And it is a great honor for me to be part of such a great team and also great discussion. So we are learner. So it is really thanks, Sharif. So to invite me such a platform. So regarding technology, so I hear a lot of things and very beneficial. So regarding technology and health, because basically I am doctor and surgeon, I want to highlight some things. So no doubt technology is very important. And just professor also highlight about vaccine of corona and also about RNA and messenger RNA. So if we see the role of technology, no doubt all of us that we are sitting here and technology is for humanity. So we are doing something new for services and for services of better services of humanity. Just imagine now we are doing robotic surgery. Surgeon is sitting in USA but performing surgery in Dubai. So this is not possible. So now we are sitting all over the world, so we are watching each other, and also this is also technology. But one thing that I must highlight at this international platform, that according to my field, according to health, what is more than 60-70%, I can ask you, we think about treatment, not on prevention. That is very important. Yes, I know there are many infectious diseases. Yes, we have controlled with vaccination, and now in most of the world we can see, yes, there is no more these infectious diseases. But just imagine, we are new technologies about treatment of diabetes, but less research on to how can we prevent diabetes, how can we change this gene, this control this, how can we so because there is some mutation in gene that cause these diseases. Yes, now it is working, but not like treatment. Maybe if we see, it is just imagine, so now millions of people are suffering with some diseases. Our main concentration, industry concentration, technology concentration is on treatment. But if we prevent their diseases, I don't know, maybe many of industry loss, because then no need to treat. So then you can imagine, but this is my just message. So you are someone who may be effective. So this is just because when we talk with each other, so it is need to research more on prevention. No doubt we must do for treatment everything. It may be hope we will see after 1 decade, after 10 years. So then there is less chance of cancer. How can we control this one? There is less chance of diabetes. If
Dr.
Dubai,
Imran.
our lab, we can predict cancer in patients. We can predict cancer, but need more research, need more work on this part of treatment, prevention. So we must prevent diseases. Just you can imagine, Now we are living in a pandemic, that is a COVID-19, and hopefully within 1 or 2 years it will be controlled. So with vaccine and different. But the real pandemic is obesity. The real pandemic is diabetes. That is real pandemic. So how can we deal with this pandemic? So we must do something. How can we raise basic metabolic rate so people will not be obese? So how can we control this? So these things are, in my opinion, need to more research. We can use these technologies for this purposes. So for prevention, hopefully, we will see such a technology and our concentration of someone who are decision maker. Because yes, I know there is industry involved, lot of benefit for the industry when there are diseases, sorry to say. So yes, their interest will be less. If there will be no diabetes, so then you can see, then there will be no diabetic foot, then there will be no other side effects of diabetes. So then there will be no need to treat these, and so much technology and industry especially is involved for the treatment of these side effects. When we prevent diabetes, so then industry will go. So maybe they have no interest, but we scientists, we must think about this. So we must research more on prevention, okay, on treatment. So because industry is directly involved, there is lot of research, and this is a good thing, I appreciate. But also we must think about prevention. Thanks, Sharif. So just I highlight from health point of view.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Imran. This is also important for us. Mr. Stewart, you are also an entrepreneur and from the technology industries. So how do you want to analyze your views on technology and entrepreneurship?
Well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everybody. On the basis you can hear me clearly, Sharif, you are smiling, so technology is working in my favor this time. And the way I view this whole process around technology and entrepreneurship is it's a bit like bread and butter, I think. It's something that now is not just expected, but an absolute necessity in some ways. And it can be down to the simplest of ideas. We are very fortunate that we've worked in a number of different areas, both in the developed world and very much frontier markets. And one of the factors here is that wherever your product service is leading, technology is the driver behind it now. Primarily, my focus has been around the financial sector. So one of the kind of fears has been the way technology has kind of taken that over, and fintech itself has been a big growth sector, continues. In fact, I would suggest actually fintech is in very much its kind of early stage. It's kind of just learning to crawl. I think we've got a long way to go, and I think it's a sector worth watching very closely. And in fact, I think it's very important for growth because, as I've said before in your talks, Sharif, when I've been on a panel not dissimilar from this, and Rob, I recognize you may remember me saying this, financial sector, finance is the first domino to fall. We need the finance sector to kind of grow this, and therefore we need the entrepreneurs and the technology to back those two and to work well together to support the development of economies, to support the development of those different areas. And in fact, I think we've seen some massive changes in the financial services sector over the kind of recent years that are supporting that. Some for the better. I think some is starting to lose. And this kind of is a segue into my next kind of part I wanted to kind of mention, in that we're starting to be very cautious that we mustn't lose the contact. Dr. Abbas, you were saying around this, the focus around healthcare. Social impact is a really big part of this. And social entrepreneurship is a very big growth area. Now, you have to excuse me. This distinguished panel, unfortunately, because I was not able to be part of this, I hope I'm not repeating anything that's been said already. But if I am, hopefully I'm supporting and enhancing the conversations that I've had so far, and we are creating good consensus. So we need to kind of look at the kind of not just the ideology, but the practicalities of how technology and entrepreneurship can grow and develop into this more impactfulness around the social, humanitarian aspect, whether it be around healthcare, whether it be around housing, whether it be around education. Education is a very big factor, and we need to be very mindful of that. The other facts around kind of technology, everything has a semiconductor in it these days. I probably have at least 2 or 3 devices attached to my body that have a semiconductor in it. Everything is now have its connectivity. So we're seeing this massive growth in the marketplace around where we are connected to each other. We are connected to the machinery around us. We are connected to the way things develop and grow. And this is changing the way the world works massively. We've seen it already. And Moore's law kind of interprets this kind of doubling, well, every 2 years. I think it's growing fastest in many ways. We still do not understand, with things like quantum computing and the development around some of the technology that I'm not even going to pretend to understand, and I probably never will. I have that advantage. I've got to the age where I have an excuse that I can say, well, no, I'm not even going to try and learn that. I'm going to let the youngsters explain it to me and deal with it. But I want to understand the impact around that. That's really important to me. So I think that's going to be a really big part. This brings me to my kind of final part in these comments I wanted to bring to the panel today. And that's around lifestyle. So technology and entrepreneurship is driving towards something which is very useful towards our lifestyle. Dr. Abbas, I've heard your comment. You talked about briefly obesity, and we've talked about also the connectivity that's created around healthcare and also lifestyle. Lifestyle is becoming more and more important. We have these amazing kind of smartphones we attach to ourselves and live by. Well, they're not phones anymore. Sorry, I now don't call it a phone. I mean, I don't know how often people actually receive or make a phone call on these devices, but when I look at my screen activity, I think Spotify is up there with Google Maps and things. It's not a phone these days. It's a connective device. And the whole factor around this is that the apps we download are all gearing towards this lifestyle focus. Now, believe me, as an entrepreneur, I want to improve my lifestyle. I want to get out and be active. I want to be healthier. I want to live longer. And it's not just live longer, but I want my life to be of a quality that means that if I live longer, also my quality of life is good. Now, I'm sure she won't mind me mentioning, I have an elderly aunt who will be 109 next January, who still lives at home, who has done her very best to remain connected. To be fair, at 108 and a half, it's difficult to understand the development of technology. But you can see the healthcare, the lifestyle that's enabled her to maintain a standard of living at that age, which is fairly comparable with probably the average 85 to 95-year-old. So we are working towards this dramatic change in the way we manage our lifestyle. And that's really, really important. So I think, if I had to bring anything to the table in conclusion today, when looking at technology and entrepreneurship, one, they are bound together. They are bound together very, very closely. But we have to be very mindful and careful and also positive to make sure that connectivity, that binding together is for the betterment of humanity, betterment of this planet. I very rarely come on a panel and don't mention the issue around the climate emergency, but there it is. And the Sustainable Development Goals, all 17. But, number 17 being partnership, of course. But we need to make sure that we are using this to work towards a better place. So better for humanity and the people, this planet, and still for prosperity. We don't have to do this for free. We need to do this so that we can actually be productive as well. So I hope that is of some help, Sharif, and thank you for inviting me to talk today.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. You give us new energy. So, Mr. Rob, my question is that, we are discussing about entrepreneurship, even from our major target in Asian community, specifically the Asia Pacific communities. So one thing is very common, how we can develop better ecosystem. We are discussing about education, financings, or many things, government role, policy, incentives, many things. So how we can develop better ecosystem? What your advice? Not only Mr. Rob, I want to get this answer from everyone. This is very important. In COVID situations, what will be the better strategy for entrepreneur ecosystem?
Well, who are we talking about? Government setting it up? Industry setting it up?
Actually, if you focus on the Asian culture, let's say Asia Pacific culture. If you think about India, China, or example Malaysia, they are more or government oriented. Government take a lot more good incentive, and government taking different kind of initiative for entrepreneurship and other thing, and their decision is very powerful. They have sovereignty. Yes, India, example, Bangladesh or Pakistan, they more follow like US ecosystem, what I understand from their economy and other things. They have many privatization, many private corporations. They are trying to do system. But we have to think combined, like how we can develop this ecosystem with the help of government and corporation.
Well, the ideal thing is to collect the knowledge that you need to provide to the entrepreneurs. Young companies typically fail for one of three reasons. They don't understand their market, they don't understand their technology, and they don't understand the ecosystem they have to create to be successful. And there are people in every country that have those capabilities. If you can organize, vet, there are a lot of folks that take advantage of young companies as well. So it's important to vet the experts and then provide mentoring to the people that deserve it. So you're not so that the mentors aren't spread too thin, and they can provide their help, and so that the entrepreneurs coming up can rely on the mentorship, on the quality of the mentorship and its availability to accomplish the tasks. Also making available certain types of systems. We can do quite a bit now with regard to simulation. So you don't really need to build something to validate whether it's real or not, at least not build it physically. You can build a simulation in a computer system and test your concept that way. But what you need is resource. You need initially people that can mentor these young companies, point out what it is they need, help them find their market, and help them assure a higher probability of success. And so if you can organize those resources, make them available, and make them so they don't take advantage of these young companies, that's probably where the effort should be spent early on.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mr. Rob. David Schumacher. Can you hear me? Mr. David.
Yes, I can. Thank you very much. Well, ecosystem is interesting. Coming from the American perspective, I tend to look at this interplay between the public and the private sectors. And we'll hear people talk about, public needs to do more. When I say public, I mean government, I mean bodies of that nature. And then you hear this argument of, private needs, less restrictions, needs to do more. I'm sure if Edward was here, he could have a lot to say about that, and I'd love to hear his comments. I come from the school of thought that we need both of these things to really be able to drive technology forward. And then I'll say, before I give an example, I say that once we can figure out what the public element is and what the private element is in something, that we need to stay in those lanes and let the people do what they do best and not try to encroach into other areas. So here's an example, the US space program. There's a lot going on with that. I mean, it's been over 50 years since humans have walked on the moon. That was a government-run program. A lot of it, as we know from history, was inspired by global politics and global military strategies. But nevertheless, this was a great advancement in being able to put human beings into space safely and take them someplace literally where we've never gone before. I mean, that's used as a way to describe something, but I mean, they literally physically went someplace that humans had never gone before. But then we didn't go back because government interests moved into other areas. It wasn't until now we see Blue Horizon, we see SpaceX, we see the innovation of the private industry driving that forward, but there's still a role for government to play in this. With NASA, with the Project Artemis program for the moon, both of them have things that they bring to the table. One is the ability to be able to fund in advance before a product, before a return on investment that you need from an entrepreneurial aspect can be accomplished. Government can do that if there's a will for that. And then at some point you can reach a critical mass where the slow and cautious and sometimes politically driven aspects of government can then be expanded on by the private sector to be able to take this product forward. So I'm using the space program as an example, but we could turn this to pharmaceuticals. We could turn this into a number of different areas. This, I think, is this ecosystem that I think that you're asking about, Sharif, that actually drives innovation and moves it forward. And it's not an either or. I want to finish by saying it's public and private. It's them doing each one what they do best and not feeling like that they need to compete against each other.
Thank you, Dr. Eric.
Yeah. So what can you do? Okay. That's a question that takes much longer than what can be answered in one of these our forums that you're doing here. It's a very complex endeavor to make such a change. But what I would advise is don't look at the surface. Don't go and take a snapshot of Silicon Valley and say, well, okay, they have nice weather and they've got these cool looking buildings and blah, 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 and then try to copy that. Far too often, people copy only the surface. What they view, what they see, they copy the surface, and they hope that, okay, if I just do it that way, then I will succeed similarly. And that's not how it works, right? I mean, think of it as like an athlete, okay? You look at an athlete and you see that, oh, okay, this person, he runs this way. So you copy that kind of a thing and you try to imagine that, oh, if I do it like that, I'll be just as successful. And it's absolutely not the case. What has to be done is all the practice, all the training, all the support work that comes into play that makes it. And if you don't look at that back part, you'll never get the success that you're going to do. You need to look at the back part. So other governments, other nations need to look and really analyze this. You got to take the innovation cluster that is Silicon Valley, because that's a good one to use as an example, and break it apart. You got to tear it apart and you look at it piece by piece and see how each one fit together. Okay, and how it fit together in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and so forth, and what values had all the different parts contribute to it. Okay, and then you analyze that, you distill that, you abstractify that, and then understand what are the essential parts that are necessary. Okay, so you can discard, oh, we really don't need this part and we don't need that part, but we do need these things because those are the critical ones. And you will never find out what those are until you break it apart to actually examine it. Okay, so don't look at the surface. You got to break it in there and you got to look at it in the fundamental. And then once you figure it out, then build something of that sort. And that's what you have to do. And that is going to be, actually, I mean, the analysis of Silicon Valley is pretty well known. So there's a lot of information out there on that. And asking people who are in Silicon Valley, like Rob and I and several other people, we may not be able to, because we're in the forest and we can't see the forest because of the trees. So we're the trees, and it's too complex. You have to see it from the outside sometimes to kind of like understand what things are happening, perhaps. Okay, and then once you get that, then you can really recreate it. And I think to some extent, I think China, because they have a lot of people and a lot of smart people, have sort of sussed it out, and they have kind of succeeded to some degree. I think there's still some pushback because there's a lot of inertia from, literally thousands of years of Chinese culture and history that has kind of pushed back on trying to make the changes that people are not comfortable with. They also see Japan has done something similar, but now Japan, got up there and they've crested and they kind of like have kind of stalled because they haven't gotten anything new coming out of Japan recently. But other nations have an opportunity to really take advantage of this. And that the thing is that you need to do in Bangladesh and in India and other places in Malaysia, is to extract it, find out what's key, and then do those things. Okay. And that's really all you have to do. And of course you have to convince and then get the buy-in. That's the hardest part, is the getting buy-in from everyone else to say, yes, let's do this. I got to guarantee you, there's always going to be some people who's just going to say no, because them saying no will break your system, and then they win. Okay. Because it's a power play and people want to do that. Assholes, that they are. So anyway,
thank you.
I'll end it
thank you,
that.
Madam. Yes, Brenda.
So you're talking about that ecosystem. In my view, you need all parts to work together, because if you look at, if you have to get the technology to work, you need the infrastructure. And for you to have the infrastructure, you need the finances to ensure that that is in place. For you to make it also work or implement, you need the labor force. And those people will need the skills to be able to do it. You also need the environment that will be ready for it. You need the client at the end of the line, or the consumers, to be able to consume what's coming on. So you need to understand, maybe as Dr. Eric is saying it, the whole ecosystem, and understand exactly what is needed in each part. But I think for me, the short answer to this will be, we honestly need the collaboration between the private and the public sector. If I look at where I am in South Africa, for example, I am fortunate to be sitting in the advisory committee of the 4IR Presidential Commission, has an intention or a mandate to understand what are the legal requirements, what are the challenges that we have, and how do we change all of that to ensure that when we start to implement or start to bring these things into the different government departments or into different communities, we understand exactly what needs to change where. One of the biggest challenges that we face is exactly that the needs are different everywhere, and it's not one size fit all. You'll find that in one area, sitting in Johannesburg, the majority of the entrepreneurs in Johannesburg, because it's the economic capital of the country, they don't need finance as much. They just need, they've got the finances, they've got a bit of skill. All they need is the change in legislation to enable them to implement this. You go to another part of the country or another sector, you find that things are different there. They don't even have the infrastructure. They don't even have the finances to start. In other areas, they don't even know what you're talking about. So I think, all of these things needs to come together, and that impact assessment and understanding exactly where the needs are and what those needs are becomes very, very important when you start to take this journey and understand that whatever you put in place will impact all people, but the impact will be different for different sectors, for different people. And we need to find a way of making sure that we minimize that impact, from a negative point of view, and just maximize where the impact is positive. Now, the private sector fortunately has done a lot of this implementation. They have got the expertise, they've got the financial muscle to be able to do this. Not so much in the public sector, even though, maybe government can edge, but as well in the public sector. In some cases, you've got the know-how because you've got the communities that are innovators. They just need the opportunity to be able to showcase what they can do. You've got people that are sitting on their own doing these things already. They just need a platform so that they can showcase what they can do. So if all of us work together, we'll be able to do this faster, we'll be able to do this better. If we can just break this silo mentality where I want to do it for me, as long as I can get rich, as long as, I can stop hoarding this stuff. If we can just start coming together and work towards, one goal, which is making sure that the future is better for humanity. Another thing that becomes very important is stopping this thing of when something new comes, and I'll call this new because for us in Africa, it is the first time that we really get into technology and understanding it and really wanting to advance as fast as everybody else around the world. Is stopping this thing of doing something just for now, just to solve the current problem. We need to start being futuristic about this thing, being proactive in how we implement or how we put our technology, our strategies together, or our implementations plans together. So let the solution that we build now be a solution that is forward-looking, that will also cater for future generations, so that we don't have to every 5 years be starting from scratch, doing the same thing again, thinking again. We can just customize or plug into what has already been built. Because if the foundation is good, it becomes easier for us to build going forward.
Thank you. Mr. Donald.
I want to start out thanking everybody. Great observations. And then I want to add some new information. And one of the things that's important to understand is that if we think of technology as taking scientific advances and turning them into companies, one of the very powerful sources of that the government helps is that they can help pay for basic research. In other words, we need the scientific advances to be able to turn the scientific advances into new companies. It's a very common way. I have a friend who is technology transfer officer at both University of Washington and UC Santa Cruz, and he's actually said he would be on the show sometime, so we'll try and get him. And his job was locating the human capital that was necessary to be able to start companies and the financial capital. He didn't have to know in any detail how the mechanics of how these advances were being turned into companies, but his expertise was in organizing the resources that were necessary. And that goes back to what I was saying. So that's one aspect of the way the government can be involved. Basic research is not necessarily something companies can even afford to do. And CRISPR technology, for an instance, was invented in university labs. The country of Finland, which I'm going to get back to, took a technology that had been sitting around basically on the shelf, cell phones, and they turned the cell phones into a consumer product, created Nokia, which was at one time something like 20% of the Finnish economy. And that's, so I want to go back and emphasize something that almost everybody has said, which is the idea of social capital. Social capital are the relationships that you have with other people that allow you to get knowledge. And if you're an entrepreneur and you start doing it, things are going to go wrong that you don't even have a name for. There's something that a government official once said. He said, there's the known knowns, the known unknowns, and the unknown unknowns. And we run into the entrepreneurs will run into the unknown unknowns, which is why the importance of mentorship and connections with people in other places. You need to learn something yourself. You need to learn how to read a balance sheet. You need to be able to understand not just what at a superficial degree, you need to understand all of the parts that are necessary to start a company. You need to understand the technology, you need to understand the market, you need to understand financing, and you need to understand the human capital that you need, the human resources part of your company, and you need to be able to get them. So that again is building social capital. I've said this before, that the luckiest people are the people who talk to the most other people. That's what makes you lucky, is getting to know other people. I know a superficial amount about quantum computing because I sat down in a pub in Palo Alto, and lo and behold, there was a Cambridge professor who was consulting to Google on quantum computing. So I said to the guy, wow, I don't really understand this. Could you give me a summary? And he gave me a 5-minute talk about quantum computing. And it's an interesting thing. When people are really, really good at something, they're able to explain it to people. They know metaphors and other kinds of things that allow. So I have a superficial understanding just because I talked to the guy next to me in basically a pub. And what I want to talk about infrastructure is at Stanford for maybe 3 years, I was part of a group that's now scattered called the Silicon Valley Network Analysis Project. And we did actual research on the resources and connections in Silicon Valley as a theory that was part of what made it more successful. And we did come up with resources with proofs of that. But I say it's one of the things, that's the social capital and human capital aspect of it. But Silicon Valley over the years, just because of what they've done, you can drive down Page Mill Road and there is 10-story office building after 10-story office building that's filled with lawyers. You drive down Sand Hill Road and there's building after building that's venture capitalists. So basically the resources, and if you want some smart technology, they've got Stanford University sitting there right in the middle of all of this. And Berkeley's a stone's throw away. So the question that you asked, if you think about it, I mentioned one way that government can aid new businesses is by helping create the scientific research or doing the scientific research that can be turned into technology. But if you look at governments themselves, another way that they try and intervene is being able to help companies start. And a common way that they do that is they build what's called an incubator. And what it is a place where the businesses can start, and a lot of their costs are covered. So they have lawyers at the incubator to help them patent things. So they have finance people at the end, and they mentor them and teach them what to do. But the danger in that is that one of the most important things to think about is who is your customer? And sadly, within an incubator, the incubator becomes their customer because that's who they're getting money from. And so one of the strategies is to say you can be in the incubator for 1 year or 2 years, and then they're going to toss you out. So you definitely have to start thinking about how you're actually going to make money in order to survive. And I really think that looking at models of other countries and seeing how they've been successful at a policy level is is just a super important thing to do. And I was lucky enough to help the Finnish government to some degree, telling them the stuff I'm telling you right now. But the Finns take it seriously. They're a teeny little country with no resources, and they realize that they have to build relationships with other countries to even have markets of any size. And they've found ways to balance their the support that they give to entrepreneurs and the danger of having the wrong market for entrepreneurs, and have been very successful at turning technology from anywhere, because they can get it from anywhere because they have the networks into everywhere. Their universities pair up with Stanford to do things. They pair up with Berkeley to do things. They make it possible for the people inside of Finland to be able to be aware of the technology that they can turn into companies. And I'm just going to finish by saying that the story of Nokia. And as I said, they bought the patents from the U.S. government to cell phones, which were extraordinarily expensive. And they took that technology and refined it, again, by having resources, by having connections. Finland made a lot of money at one time, basically trading with Russia, because other people in the free world weren't allowed to trade with them. But they kept the relationships open, and they didn't necessarily use money. They would trade services for oil or different kinds of things. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, all of a sudden they're like, uh-oh. It basically put them into a terrible recession. But one of they realized that there was all these Russian computer scientists that were now unemployed. So they basically built a city, Oulu. Well, Oulu had been around, but they put a university there and turned it into a technology hub, put Nokia's research, bought the patents from the US government, and Nokia turned them into phones. They're the ones that did it in the first place. Then Nokia died. I mean, it's still around, but it's nothing like it was. So they created innovation hubs where they used the knowledge that I'm talking about to be able to start companies that are successful. I mean, they're doing well now again. So if you can look at Finland and look at what they did, a little country with no resources, that's one of the most, I mean, everybody admires Finland's technology, and everybody admires what Finland's done. So from a policy level, that's what I'd recommend you do.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Imran. Can you hear me? Okay. I think, anyway, Mr. Stewart.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. In the defense of Finland, you're right, Don. I mean, Finland's an interesting, actually, case study on that basis. What is interesting is Finland is about 42nd on the rankings of GDP, but in fact it's about 14th on GDP per capita. And there's a good example of actually how technology and entrepreneurship actually has worked well despite headwinds, and how you need to develop and think forward and innovate. There was kind of 4 or 5 things that came from the discussions and listening to the commentary, and the really helpful. And thank you everybody for making this contribution, because this has been a really interesting kind of last hour or so. And the elements that came to me came around things like trust, how technology tries to create trust or actually ends up with mistrust, how it creates confidence, and the confidence around that for entrepreneurs to be able to develop quickly and use of that. The commitment and collaboration. Brenda, you talked about collaboration. I think it's such a key word in this, because the idea of technology being able to create and develop collaboration, not just on your doorstep, but globally, is a really important factor. And of course, the outcome. And there were just 3 or 4 things I wanted to pick up with, I think, from the conversations, Sharif, that I think were really helpful. And David, I'm going to come to you first, because I think your example around the space program is really interesting, because I'm going to lead into, if you watch sci-fi films today, You know, and they talk about 2030, 2040, 2050, you know, Mars and whatever. It's all private financing. The governments are no longer being there. They have the political influence, there's no doubt about it, but it's often the private financing that seems to be driving it. The funding is coming from a direction. And I can see that the whole process around being citizen-led becoming more and more important to this. We had a previous discussion on another one of your panels, Shiv, about blockchain and the implementation of and the influence of blockchain and distributed ledger technology. And you can see how that's become such a critical part of that. Dr. Eric, I had some things to take away from your comments here I really liked. We're in the process having some actual government funding here. I live in a place called Cheltenham in Gloucestershire in the Cotswolds, in a beautiful part of the UK, as you can see from behind me. It's very nice. And one of the things that actually we're doing is we're in the process of developing a cyber hub here in Cheltenham. We have a immense resource in something called Government Communications Headquarters, which is approximately 3/4 of a mile to my left over here. And GCHQ is it's where all the spies live, basically, I think is the wrong way people put it. It is our headquarters for government communications. And there's an immense amount of knowledge in there. So what we're trying to do is saying it's not just about funding here, but it's looking at what Silicon Valley did really well and looking at other areas. Singapore is another good example, how innovation hubs can create. Let's take and develop it. How can we create a platform where we can bring entrepreneurs in, this untapped talent, so that we can bring them on board with the funding and then see where we've got the skill sets out there. So how can we go to government areas and the funding, where the funding has been really high, going back to like the space program and bringing in the technology and really make that work for us. And that is something which we're looking to do over the next 5 years here. I think, you know, Brenda, your commentary was really interesting around the collaboration. And I think the public sector, I have family in South Africa, and I'm familiar with to some extent the culture and the history around that. And, you know, one of the things that I've noticed in South Africa over the last decade has been the great drive towards innovation and innovation around communities. And I think one of the real key factors around here is the enabler is the platform. So entrepreneurs need a platform to sit on. Technology needs a platform to drive on. We need to create these spaces, whether it be in a community, whether it be on something more less tangible, but it needs to be something where we can come to work. I'm the founding member of something called Other Dots Foundation, and we're leading on an education process exactly around that. It's about building the platform that people can come onto with their innovative ideas and drive the technology. On the final commentary, actually, which relates to Donald, your conversation you brought forward around social capital, I think it's really interesting, this, because it comes back to my initial commentary that I brought forward around how we need to look at the humanitarian impact, the social impact that all these conversations we're having on are doing. And I love that whole process of taking human capital and financial capital and how we blend it together to create a company, to create something that's innovative and bringing ideas forward. There's a really good book I can recommend by a chap called Nick Gowing and Chris Langdon called Thinking the Unthinkable. And the reason I mention this is that we've been through such immense change over the last few years. And I think actually one of the points you talked about is knowing the unknown unknowns. I think how we can create something to allow us to start being able to horizon scan and to meet those is going to be really, really helpful. They're still going to be unknown. Otherwise, there aren't unknowns, of course, anymore. But how we can develop that's going to be really, really critical going forward. So, I mean, hopefully that gives some a little bit of insight into the way my brain works, maybe. but also, I think just trying to be a little bit of a glue here, because I think I'm not the originator of ideas here. I like to think I'm more the thread that brings the diamonds together to create something which is a beautiful necklace. And I think, Sharif, thank you for this opportunity, because I think I'm going to take some great things away from here from all the speakers today. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Actually, World Talent Economy Forum, we are actually finishing our first years. It's an online initiative. So we have our traditional approach for education, let's say School of Talent Economy, our academy, our research centers, and we have engagement with our youth communities and corporations. And trust me, when we start this World Talent Economy Forums and we are bringing all of the talented people like you, like today's panelists, we are growing very fast. And now many countries, many governments, many policymakers, many corporations from developing nations especially, they are developing university, they are collaborating with us. Some organization developing different technology, they are collaborate with us. Some organizations, they are like tie up with like cope up with this industry 4.0. They are regularly following our World Talent Economy Forums. In Malaysia, many think tanks, many organizations, many corporations, now they're moving with sustainable development goals. They are following our World Talent Economy Forum contents. This way, even many friends from around, it can be from Nepal, it's from Bangladesh, it's from India, it's from Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, hundred of different organizations, they are learning every day. I get a very good feedbacks, and I want to give special thanks to our mentors, to our speakers, those who always support us. I can remember when Mr. Rob joined our first session, we just started, and still last after 1 year he's with us. I know many of our speaker has lot of challenges, like last week I do discuss with Mr. Donald. I do not know what your father's situations, I know what type of pain internally you have. Even I know many people has many challenges, many internal problem, many family problem, but still they join in World Talent Economy Forums and they're sharing their views, and we get very like good feedback from government, from corporation, from policymaker, from university. They like our methods. Like, we do not like the traditional method that one people teaching 20 students, 30 students, but when 7, 8, 10 speaker, they're discussing their different views. Let's say today, Mr. Donald's, David, Rob, Mr. Imran, Stuart, Dr. Eric, Brenda, they come from different cultures and they're sharing their views. It's actually very valuable for those who want to learn. And hopefully in the future, we can do more projects, we can do more applications. We need more of your support. We are just finishing our 1 year, and we want to give the global talent awards to all of our speakers. So soon your certification from World Talent Economy Forum we will share with all of our speakers. And hopefully the world is very beautiful. We have many things we can do. We need right people, right collaborations, and by this way we can change the world. But definitely we need a lot more collaborations in between developed nations and developing nations. Developed nations has good knowledge, good technologies. Developing nations has talent, many talents. So if we can team up together, then we can bring more resources. I'm sure we can develop a better ecosystem, and it will be very helpful for us. And yes, the Asia Pacific, 40% of the global community live in Asia Pacific, and from here 50-60% actually youth, those who are young. They need guidelines, they need mentorships. So definitely our speakers, our mentors is a very good example for everyone. I can give you the guarantee, from Prime Minister office, from Energy Ministry, from big corporations in Asia Pacific, example, even the small company, small startup, everybody actually getting involved with World Talent Economy Forum, and they're learning. Every day they are learning from our speakers. Every day they are actually understand what they have to do, what they can do, how they can contribute. But our vision is big, so that's why we are going for fundraising, because we have to touch millions of people. Trust me, from my personal life, I saw million people. It's untouched. Big companies, big industry, they never touch the grassroots level people. So the more we can engage with the grassroots level people, we can bring more solution for this world. So thank you everyone for joining this World Talent Economy Forum initiative, and we need more of your support. I directly want to go for the concluding remarks. I want to start from Mr. Rob, then Mr. Imran, then Mr. Stuart, then David, then Dr. Eric, then Brenda, and finally Mr. Donalds. Mr. Rob, what's your concluding remarks for today?
Well, as you're looking at trying to build up an entrepreneurial enterprise, the thing that's needed most of all is data, information on markets, information on past successes, information on past failures. and making that data available to your students or your aspiring entrepreneurs so that they can avoid the mistakes of others and find their fastest path to production. Often where we see gaps are in bridges. In other words, people that understand computer science and understand pharmaceuticals, understand computer science and understand farming at scale. It's those individuals that are the most valuable. And as Sharif pointed out, as you're looking between emerging economies and developed countries, people that can understand the unique benefits of the developed countries and the unique problems of the developing economies can do wonderful things in terms of bridging capability to the problem, because often in a developed country, they really have no concept of the problems developing countries are experiencing. And it's those bridge skills that can bring forth solutions that can actually work. Because often, and I've seen this a number of times, what you have is an expert that comes in from a particular environment that doesn't understand the limitations of the environment they've been dropped into. And they're providing advice and consultation that won't work, that fundamentally won't function in the developing environment, because they either don't have the resource or they've got problems that the developed country doesn't have. For instance, shortage of water, shortage of medicine, shortage of food. It's not something the developed countries experience at scale, but the developing nations have that in spades. And so and little things like internet connectivity is something we take for granted in the developed area, but something that is less than stable in developing countries. And so understanding those difficulties and understanding how to apply the learning in the developed world and apply it to these developing countries is a critical skill. And you need that in the program.
Thank you, Mr. Rob. Mr. Imran.
Yeah, thank you, Sharif. Really, in my opinion, you are doing your best, and we need such a platform. And also, just as you have mentioned, so in developed countries, they have a lot of opportunities, like they have technology, they have knowledge. But if we compare with developing countries, maybe there is a lot of talent. And also, if we see at root level, so yes, there is a big gap. So this access to these technology, yes, there is a gap. So with how, as Professor Rob mentioned, so yes, we must fulfill this gap. And when we will have a direct interaction with such a people, then we will see, yes, we must do on these are the main points. If we highlight this, if we fulfill these points, these topics, then it will be very easy to accept, to fulfill at least this distance or this area that is a little. And yes, in my opinion, especially health point of view, because as a surgeon, so yes, this platform is excellent. We can share our knowledge, we can share our experience, we can engage our professors from all over the world, and also then you can imagine a student who is sitting in Bangladesh, in Malaysia, in Pakistan, in India, in a village, but his access to a professor in US, in UK, in France, and also then they can exchange. And also that professor who is sitting in France, he don't know what happening in a village in Pakistan or in India, then yes, then he can think about this. So what they must do, how can they use technology to solve this issue? So then it will be a definite, we can achieve that target very speedy. Sharif, really thanks for providing such a platform, and it is great honor to be part of such a team.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Sharif. Thank you. So very, very briefly, in a summing up here, I think I'd like to just complete on looking at three things. But one of the things I want to really highlight is we need to be there for everyone. I don't think we need to just try and see who are the very best and just try and support them. We need to be there for everyone. We mustn't leave anyone behind here. The world has changed, and we've experienced this very, very severely in this kind of global pandemic that has gone on. We have learned from this. It's accelerated many things. But we must leave no one behind, but we need to find that talent. We need to go out and find that talent and work with them and give them the opportunity. So we need to allow them to think. We need to allow them to challenge. It's really important we allow them to challenge. We need to allow them to test and try. And we even need to allow them to fail. This is really important. Not every culture accepts that as a way of progress, but we need to allow them to fail. We need to look also to collaborate. I think this is something we need to be not afraid to share. We need to go out and do this. It's really important to understand that this is not a preventer, but it's an engager, and it will make things grow and help. And finally, we need to listen. We need to actually listen to the world around us. We need to listen to each other. There's so much experience and knowledge out there. We need to go out and find it, and we need to share it and bring it together. We all learn every day, every minute of our life. We need to keep doing that. So please, that's something I ask. Let's listen, let's find that untapped talent, and let's collaborate. Thank you, Sharif.
Thank you. Mr. David Schumacher.
Yeah, thanks, Sharif. For my closing remarks, I want to center on the question of why. We've talked a lot about technology and we've talked a lot about entrepreneurship, but I think it goes back to why. Now, maybe a very simplistic definition of that would be, profit for shareholders or profit for the partners, but I think in the 21st century, we need to take it beyond that. And I'm hearing some of that in other people's closing remarks. We need to look at all the stakeholders that are there, our customers, our communities, our employees. Profit beyond just the monetary. It has to work in all of those areas, I think, to truly be of value in the 21st century. So as an entrepreneur, bring your resources together around a defined purpose. Find your niche, and then take what we've talked about as far as financial capital, social capital, human capital, organize that. That's the job of the entrepreneur. Now, from my standpoint, I'm interested in primarily looking at increases in health and longevity. I'm looking at increases in the use of reason and intuition together. And I'm looking at reducing risk for humanity. Those are the three really big things. But if you stop and look at that, whatever your niche is, you can contribute to that. Somebody early on, I think it might have been Edward, talked about Henry Ford, and he talked about mass production. So what does that have to do with these three things? I think it has to do a lot. He provided transportation in a form that was not available to take people where they could go before. Before they would have walked, they would have used animals. He transformed society through the use of mass production and those cars. That had an effect on health. It had an effect on longevity, I'm sure. It also was a use of reason and intuition together. And it had an effect of reducing risk in a number of different ways. Now, I want to close on the standpoint that when I usually talk about this, counterpoints come up that, well, with any new addition to technology, you're going to have an offset that's going to maybe cause more risk or cause more issues to do with health and so forth. And I don't deny that. I think that reasonable people can solve this. I think we need to be aware that we need to continue to push the positives because it's so easy to descend into negativity. Stuart talked about sci-fi movies. I love sci-fi movies. I can be inspired by them, but also many of them, they all have to be built around the drama. There's a profit motive for creating these movies together. So they may have science and technology as the background, but there's usually some evil genius or there's some catastrophe. There's something that's going on. It's too easy to get trapped in that. I think that all of us here understand that what we need to do is to keep laying out what all the positives are, because people need to hear those positives to keep moving forward to do the things that I was talking about. Thanks again for another great show, Sharif.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Eric.
Yeah. What can I say? I mean, for countries that wish to enter, I don't think anybody is entering now, but I mean to excel in technology and entrepreneurship. First, I think you need to have buy-in among the citizens of that country to make sure that they all are aligned in understanding what the goals are for that country. Again, if you have citizens that are disparate and kind of like want to go in different directions, they will sabotage the end result of what that government or what that country wants to do, and they would just sabotage it just for the sake of sabotaging it, rather than for any noble deed or anything like that. So, some way or another, that the leadership of the country, the government, the key people have to communicate and convey to the citizens of that country, of that nation, that this is a good thing, this is what we want to do, and other things of that sort. I think we can see here in the United States that there are conflicts. We have conflicts here in the United States among citizens who are vehemently anti-vax, not because they don't trust it, but they're just, whatever it is. I can't really fathom, what the rationale is myself. But things like that, they're sabotaging the direction of the country, and when that happens, it's very, very hard to get things going. Now, truth be told, America is a large country, 300-something million people, and we don't do things on a dictatorial way, so we can't just, slam it down and say, do this or else. So there is going to be a lot of pushback, and we have to entertain those who are pushing back and respect them in some degree to what they're doing. Smaller nations may be able to, because of their culture, because of their history, may be able to influence and get people to follow along quickly. A small nation like New Zealand, they managed, for example, for this pandemic, they managed to get everybody on board to be socially distanced and properly masked and all that, and they, survived this thing very well. And if you have a small enough nation of that size, 5, 10 million, 15 million, that might be doable. And if you have people with a common view and a common goal, that makes it happen. So that is very critical in order to get change happening, whether it's for technology, for entrepreneurship, or whatever. That is critical to be able to do. And that's really the key job of that government, that leadership, the political leadership, is to provide that political will for people to follow and accept in doing things. And if they can do it, more power to them. That's really it.
Thank you. Brenda.
I'm going to have to sign out. I got to leave because I have other things I have to do. So
thank you. Bye-bye. Take care. Brenda, what's your concluding remarks?
Okay, so maybe in closing for me, in support for what has been said, David spoke about longevity. I think it's Dr. Abbas who spoke a lot about health. Maybe I need to just, recommend this magazine. Sharif, you contributed to it. David contributed to the TEFS magazine. Our theme, health, longevity, and technology. in the post-COVID society, because there's a lot of articles here that can help a lot of entrepreneurs just to leverage what technology can do, especially in an era like the one we're living in now. Just not to ignore other elements of their lives, just to understand that, as we spoke about the ecosystem, everything works together so that, and then you can use technology to be able to drive all of that going forward. And also, Dr. Hudgens earlier on spoke about or showed you that book about longevity, seizing our singularity future. I absolutely recommend this book as well, because I mean, from an entrepreneurship point of view and a technology point of view, it talks to the practical ways of making sure that this happens. So just for me, I would like to thank each and every one of the panelists today, because I've learned so much and I continue to learn in all of the sessions that we've got. And I hope we can continue to collaborate going forward, sitting at the tip of Africa and also representing TEFS Africa, which looks after all the 54 countries within the African continent. We've got an impact of about 1.3 billion people in population, of a median age of 19. These are the people that are very, very technologically focused. These are people that are innovative. These are entrepreneurs. They don't want to do the 9-to-5s. They are very innovative. And we are looking out to our partners across the world to help us to be able to craft a better future for us in Africa, and also to showcase the innovation, creativity of the people that are sitting in Africa that has never before been exposed to the world. So if you are able to, please just, reach out to us. We are here, and let us collaborate and make a future better for humanity going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor Donald, what's your concluding remarks?
I had to unmute myself there. My computer was being a bit sluggish. So I want to introduce one brief new thing today, and then basically reiterate and echo in different ways what everyone else has been saying. The thing I like to introduce is about innovation and companies that you can start. And you can divide innovation into two piles: disruptive innovation and incremental innovation. Finland is especially good in general at incremental innovation, and they have courses in their schools, and that's easier for small countries. When you do disruptive innovation, you have the challenge of convincing people, getting people to understand what you've done and convincing them that it's actually valuable. Silicon Valley is good at disruptive innovation, but as I said, they have an infrastructure there where it's okay to fail. There's people who've gotten 3 companies funded. First 2 failed, and the third became incredibly successful. When I was at Stanford, I signed a little document that said that I would split basically anything that I did that turned into a useful company. Stanford would take over, they would do the patents, they'd arrange for people to market it, they would fund everything I needed to create the company, and they'd own half of it. They've done pretty well on that model because some of Google's technology was developed at Stanford, and that's why they're one of the best endowed universities in the world. They have so much money because they have Google stock. That's an important thing to remember. But what my key point is something that everyone else has said, which is that you don't know what you don't know. And entrepreneurs, we have meetups back pre-COVID time, and it's starting again because everybody's getting vaccinated. And entrepreneurs tend to go to the meetups that are exactly focused on what it is that they're doing. They, if they're interested in deep learning, they go to deep learning meetups. I would really highly recommend to anybody, and it's the most valuable thing that's ever happened in my life, is to try and talk to everybody. Go to meetups on marketing. If you're an entrepreneur that's an expert at some sort of engineering technology, I've seen presentations by so many companies where they have this really cool engineering thing, and you're looking at them and you're going, why would anybody actually use that? They don't have that. I actually arranged a little panel discussion, and one of the people was Suhas Patil, who developed a fabless semiconductor, and he's one of the most successful entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley. And he said, don't hide your idea. No one's going to be able to do it. I mean, there's ideas in the water cooler that are the same as your idea. Whatever idea you have, there's thousands of people talking about it. And I can verify that because I used to get lots of business plans, and every one of them would think they had this secret, wonderful thing, and I'd get 50 that were the same thing. And Suhas Patil said, talk to everyone about your idea. You don't know who's going to be able to help you. You might meet them in a laundromat. And that's the recommendation that I want to make. I want to say one other thing, which is about technology transfer. One of the things you can do when you're in an academic situation is that you can partner with people from other countries to write papers. And people from Stanford will partner with you if you have a good idea. I've partnered with people in several universities, and I'll continue to do that. People are happy to get their name on a paper if you do most of the work. It's great. So it goes back to what I'm saying about develop relationships with everybody you possibly can, because you don't know who's going to be able to help you. As I said, you might meet them in a laundromat. And thank you. I always enjoy being on this show. I just love all the people that are here. And I'm really excited by the idea that maybe we're helping somebody somewhere. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining today's sessions. And I request all of our audience share our content as much as possible with your policymaker, with your corporation, with your academy. This is the way we can improve, we can learn from each other, and we can grow together. And what Brenda said, we also need more collaboration, more partnerships, as well as most important thing is that applications is beauty. So when we have any kind of like technology, it can be science or anything, we need to apply that. If we develop something exclusive, but millions of people, they do not get involved with my innovation, it will not be helpful. So developing nations, I said in Asia Pacific, even in Africa, Asia Pacific, 40% of the populations. So we need to get involved. We need to help people, especially healthcare, what Mr. David said about longevity. Healthcare need a lot of support, lot of improvement, a lot of collaboration. Trust me, lot of collaboration. We have lackings of human resources as well. We have lackings of doctors, nurses, and many more things. So the more we engage with this kind of modern science, modern engineering and technology, the engineering side, those who innovate the new things, this is also helpful. On the other side, the people, those who actually get support from this modern innovation, it's also helpful. So we are open for that. We have access with the millions of people. So definitely it will be helpful for us. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. Mr. David, Brenda, Mr. Donald, Mr. Rob, Imran, and our most powerful Mr. Stewart. Thank you for joining today. Thank you everyone. Bye-bye and take care.
Thank you, Sharif. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sharif. Thank you, Sharif. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
My new.